Hey guys, welcome back to Loft Sports. I'm Tyler.
I'm Seth.
Today we're going to be coming to you with our Pac-12 video, looking at the top storylines, biggest games of this season, and then as always we'll predict our conference standings by division. But first of all, we want to give a special shout out. Thank you to you guys. We've just started this recently, but we've already gotten quite a few followers so far. If you could like our page on Facebook, subscribe on YouTube, that goes a long way with us growing this channel. If there's anything you guys want us to talk about, whether it be football, basketball, baseball, or anything else, let us know.
Yeah,
and trash talk is always welcome.
Yeah, if there's a specific thing you want to hear, a specific team you want us to do kind of a season outlook on, give us your thoughts. We'll do it for you.
All right, sounds good. All right, so here we go with the Pac-12 for the upcoming 2019 season. The top headlines.
Yeah, so we're looking at it's kind of been a theme this year, but again, we're talking about year two coaches in a conference. I mean, when we're talking about it a couple years ago, just that whole coaching landscape, so many moves going on, it's kind of hard to follow. We're starting to see some of those hires separate themselves. Hopefully this year things become a little more clear. But here in the Pac-12, starts with Chip Kelly. What he did at Oregon speaks for itself. If he can get UCLA back there this year, that'd be pretty remarkable. I don't think they'll be at that level, but we'll get into that later. Then you got Kevin Sumlin at Arizona. What he did at A&M was really impressive, but that was also at Johnny Manziel. When Johnny Manziel left, things kind of, we'll see how good of a coach he really is what I'm getting at there. Then we got Mario Cristobal at Oregon. They're projected to win their division, projected to potentially be a Rose Bowl playoff contending team. Who knows? And then we got Herman Edwards, old Herm, at Arizona State. So, what I thought was going to be the worst hire of the year last year. I thought he'd be there 2 years and out. He had a winning record, got returning starters. He could make some waves this year.
Yeah, had a better first year than Frost. So,
damn, really?
Like I said, trash talk always welcome.
Except
all right,
right here.
What else we got looking at this conference?
Yeah, another thing we've been talking about is, does this conference have a playoff team? Pac-12's been out of it since, I believe, Oregon was the last team to be
No,
in.
Washington did make it in 2016.
That's right.
But only two of the 5 years they've had one.
So can they get a playoff team? They got some good teams in there that have the potential. Seems like that's always the Pac-12. I think that's what the P stands for, is potential. The teams don't really ever realize it, but we'll see. Maybe this is the year. Clay Helton at USC. How he still has a job, I don't know, after a losing record. One of the proudest historic teams in college football. You're a rival with them. You've played them every year for how long? Go ahead and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, if I was going to name off the 8 to 10 programs in college football that were the blue chip programs, USC would be within the first 5 to 8 that I would name off. Endless recruiting hotbed, Southern California. No excuse they shouldn't be a top 10 team every year.
Yeah, I mean, if he's probably the one coach in America whose seat at the start of the year is the hottest. I don't know. You feel that's my opinion there. So we'll see what shakes.
He's on the short list, no doubt.
We'll see how that shakes out. Yeah.
All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at some of the biggest non-conference games that will affect the Pac-12. These are important, I think, more so for the Pac-12 than any other conference, because I think it was just last year the Pac-12 went 1-7 in bowl games, so they're coming into this season with kind of a stereotypical 8 ball that they're behind. They are not perceived. They are probably in most people's eyes the 5th best power conference. So they've got a lot to prove if they are going to make a push for a playoff spot. If there's a team that they're neck and neck with, a non-conference champion, whether it be Notre Dame or a second SEC or Big Ten team, they've really got to win these non-conference games across the board and show that their league is deep enough. The first one that comes to mind is Auburn and Oregon. Yeah,
I mean, you look at that game, Auburn and Oregon, both teams that are, Auburn's trying to prove last year was a down year. They're trying to rebuild. Oregon's trying to prove last year wasn't a fluke. The game day's going to be there. That's going to be the is it week 0 technically?
No, it's week 1.
Week 1 game day for them. So that's going to be a big game. How do you see that shaking out?
I think Oregon will win that game. We'll get into that a little more with our week 1 look ahead for our preview for the week, but just kind of a sneak preview. I think Oregon is better than the Washington team that played Auburn last year, week 1. Yeah. And Washington, if they could have had any touchdowns, I think they kicked like 5 field goals that game.
Yeah.
If they could have scored it one time, they would have won. And that's really both those teams ended up having terrible seasons. So sometimes top 10 preseason rankings can be meaningless by the time you get to the end of the year. But I do think Oregon's the better team, but can they handle the hype? The next game on the list, Notre Dame and USC, traditional rivalry. What do you see going on there?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those games that you live for as a college football fan. Like you said, play every year for how long now? It's got so much history behind it. I don't think USC is on Notre Dame's level right now. I think USC somehow has found themselves in a rebuild stage. I think that's going to be... It could be a close game just because of the rivalry, and there's no denying USC does have the talent. And Notre Dame has shown they can play down to competition over the years. It could be a close game, but Notre Dame's the better team. They should win that game.
Had a lot of success with USC at home, too. We do get them in South Bend. Lastly, the biggest one that's worth mentioning, there are a few others, but UCLA hosts Oklahoma.
Yeah.
How do you see that shaping out? Sooners coming out west.
That's a really interesting game for a couple different reasons. It is kind of hard to travel out to the west, time zone changes, everything like that. It's been tough historically for Midwest teams to go out there and kind of handle that, but if there's a team that can do it, it'd be Oklahoma. Jalen Hurts, it's going to be his first test, the big test, kind of a different type of stage, different environment. He's been through it before. He's played in countless big games. But we're talking UCLA and Chip Kelly more so. That's going to be a measuring stick for them. Have they taken any sort of a next step to becoming relevant as a contender for the Pac-12? That's the first step we'll see it.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a very interesting game. How far has UCLA come from year 1 to year 2?
Yeah.
All right, biggest games within the conference. The first one that comes to my mind, it's a historic rivalry. Doesn't get a lot of mentioning like some of the other big rivalries in college football, but it is a heated rival nonetheless. That's Oregon and Washington.
Yeah, I mean, Oregon-Washington, those border state games are always kind of unique, especially for the fan bases, because you just naturally run into that fan base that seems more than others, everything like that. Oregon and Washington, they're going to be the two that I think battle it out for the North. A little bit of a preview there, but I don't think it's too much of a shock for people.
Well, you got Washington State and Stanford in there.
That's true, but I think I'm a fan of tiers when I look at divisions and conferences, and I think there's two, then the next three probably, and so on. But I think that's a game that could very easily decide the North. It'll be an interesting one. I do think Oregon probably pulls that out, though.
Okay. The next one probably going to decide the South, although there could be some shakeups there. The South is probably, in my mind, along with the Big Ten West and the ACC Coastal, the most unpredictable of divisions this year. USC and Utah. This is a Friday night game. It is at USC, but those weeknight games, as we've talked about in previous videos, there's a lot of chaos that happens there.
Yeah.
How do you see that one going down?
I mean, those kind of weird week games, the Thursday, Friday games, they're odd to prepare for, and it's kind of a shame that a game that's going to probably decide a division in a Power 5 conference is a Friday game. Now, yeah, it's only one more day of prep, one more day of practice, all that, but it's still just weird. With that game, though, not to give really too much of a preview, it's a big game for both programs. I agree with you. Those two are probably going to be the ones battling out in the South. USC's kind of switching to more of an air raid style. Utah, you know what they're about. Tough, physical play, everything like that. It's usually good against air raid. It'll be a good matchup. If you're asking me for a winner, I'd probably have to go Utah.
Okay. Utah did win the South last year. Oregon and Stanford. This has been a game that's more likely than not has decided the North most years in the Pac-12. A little less the last couple of years with the reemergence of Washington, but Stanford and Oregon, heated rivalry, a lot of great talent, really good coaching from Stanford with David Shaw, who I'm high on. That's a big one in my mind as well.
Yeah, it definitely is. When Oregon's had their good years, when they had Chip Kelly and Marcus Mariota and that offense was rolling, Stanford was the one team in the Pac-12 that consistently gave them a bit of trouble. Stanford's not afraid of that style. They're not afraid to play Oregon or anything like that. I'm not saying they should be. They've had good success. Oregon is a better team. They should win that game. Stanford is never an easy victory, though.
That's right. And then the last one that's worth mentioning, although there are others, is the Apple Cup. Washington State has struggled against Washington despite their recent success. Is this the year the Cougars finally knock off the Huskies?
I don't know. I like Mike Leach. He's unique. Let's just say that as one of the bigger characters in college football. I think what he's done at Washington State has really surprised and probably surpassed anyone's expectations. What can be accomplished there, really. How I see it, though, I just don't think Washington has the overall depth and talent. And it's not like Chris Peterson is any slouch of a coach either. He's a great coach. His record is what it is. I probably, if I'm looking at how I have the divisions falling out, I got to say Washington.
All right, let's go ahead and take a look at our standings for the Pac-12 North. Coming in at number 6. I don't think this is a shocker to anybody. I have Oregon State. Beavers are in total rebuild, first-year coach. They have not made it to a bowl game in, I think, 5 or 6 years now.
Yeah.
I have them winning 1 game overall, and that's against FCS Cal Poly. It is just not a good time to be a Beaver.
Yeah, no, when I'm sitting there and looking at the North too, I mean, I'm sitting here and my notes for Oregon State just say, ha, 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 ha. Enough said, moving on.
All right, number 5. Team that has some potential this year, but I don't think they're quite ready, and that's Cal. I have them finishing 5th. I think they'll win 4 games, 2 in the conference. I think they have a challenging game where they go to Ole Miss in the non-conference. Not that Ole Miss is going to be anything special, but I don't think they're ready to compete with an SEC team. I have Cal finishing 5th.
Cal's an interesting team. I have them 5th as well. They are intriguing to me, though. Those of you, I mean, we've just started these videos, so you don't really know, but I'm a really big defensive guy. That's kind of where everything starts with me when I look at some of these teams and how things are going to fall. Cal has one of the best young defensive coaches in the entire country. A lot of people think they have one of the nation's best secondary as well. They just don't really have an offense. That defense is going to keep them in games. The biggest question for Cal is going to be, how can they score points? Will they be able to score enough? I don't see it. He needs more time to get talent on the offense, and it seems like those defensive coaches always have a tough time doing that too. So, intriguing team with potential, but I got them finishing 5th.
Yeah, could shake up the standings with an upset. They did beat Washington last year, so their defense could keep them around. But number 4 for me, I have Washington going 9-3, but I think they lose 3 games in the conference. But I do think they upset Oregon because it's at home. They were this close last year. Now they lose Jake Browning, who is a 4-year starter. They've lost, I think they only have 4 players returning on defense, a handful on offense. But Chris Peterson has recruited well. I don't think they're ready to quite reload, so it is a little bit of a rebuilding year. But I do think they win a lot of games. I just don't think they're on the level that they've been.
Yeah, number 4 team for me is Washington State. I think last year is the year that they peak. I think Mike Leach systems has always revolved around a quarterback. You know he's going to get a guy that's going to be in there and put up points. But what they had last year in Gardner Minshew was his name? I just know Minshew. I forgot his first name for a second.
I think it was Garner or something.
Yeah, something like that. But he was a difference maker. He was a little bit different than what he's had in the past. He could scramble around. He had moxie. He could make things happen in key moments, third downs, and it showed. It separated them. I think that's a peak for Mike Leach, and I think other teams in the division have gotten better. He took advantage of I'll say a down year for his division last year, I think. So I have Washington State coming in at 4th.
Okay. My number 3 team is Stanford, mentioned kind of in the non-conference game talk. I really like David Shaw. He inherited a good program from Jim Harbaugh, but he's kept it relevant. I mean, Stanford's had a couple of years where they've been bad, but really a bad year for them is 8-9 wins, and that's for a program like Stanford that you don't think is a consistent top 25 team maybe throughout our time growing up watching college football.
Yeah.
They have been really relevant the last 10, 12 years, and that's a credit to his ability to work with lesser talent, very stringent academic standards. I hear Notre Dame fans talk about all the time, well, our academic standards limit recruiting. that's garbage because look at what Stanford does on a year-to basis.
Look at what Northwestern does.
Yeah, but Stanford even more so has been at the top of the Pac-12. They've won conference championships. They've won Rose Bowls. They've put talent in the NFL like Andrew Luck, Christian McCaffrey. I like Stanford. Yeah, I like Stanford to finish 7-2 in the league. I think they go 8-4 this year, but I think that's good enough for a third-place finish in the North.
I actually think Stanford has a really good team this year. I see two teams better than them. I have them as at number 3 as well.
Okay.
I mean, when I was looking at their notes and everything like that, I understand that they're kind of switching systems a little bit, which is intriguing to me. I think they're doing a couple different things just to match their quarterback and his skill set. I believe his name is KJ Costello. I haven't really heard of him, to be honest, until I was doing my research on it for this video.
He's played, this will be his second or third year.
Last year I have it here as a sophomore. He threw for 3,500 yards, 29 touchdowns, and only had 11 interceptions, and he had a couple hundred yards rushing too. I believe I saw he completed 65% of his passes. A quarterback like that can always keep you in games. I just think Stanford, it is kind of where they are right now. I think with Oregon being back to potentially where they've been, in Washington, I just see them as the best of the next set of teams in that division.
I gotcha. My number 2 team might be a little bit of a surprise to some, but I got Washington State. I know they lose Minshew, but this is Mike Leach. Plug in another quarterback, and you got yourself a guy that's going to be putting up Star Wars numbers. I mean, Washington State, they just find ways to continue, like Texas Tech when Leach was there. They may not win the conference, but they're going to win 8-9 games. I think they go 7-2. The North is a tough division. It's it's up there with the Big Ten East and the SEC West. Not quite the same level of the top teams, but it has 4 teams that are pretty good, is what I'm saying. The depth of it is pretty good. I mean, Cal and Oregon State are what they are, but I think Washington State gets back to 9 wins. I think they're going to surprise some people. I think they knock off Washington for the first time in a while. I think they'll beat Stanford. I don't think they're going to take down Oregon again this year, but I think Washington State is going to be in the mix.
I mean, I certainly can't argue that. I like Mike Leach. This was really close for me, really, between who I was looking at. But I got Washington, number 2. I just think Chris Peterson is going to do what he always does. He did lose Jacob Browning and Gaskin to the NFL. He's a good enough coach to replace that sort of talent, but still, I don't think they're as talented as they have been. I got them here. They got Oregon and Utah, USC at home. They do have to go to Stanford. The schedule fits nicely. That's why I have them as second in the division, more so as the schedule. I think the other teams might be better. Washington State and Stanford might be better teams, but when you're talking divisions, you got to talk about conference records. The home record just kind of helps. I got them at number 2.
My division winner is actually Oregon. Shouldn't be too big of a surprise. A lot of people eye on Oregon as a dark horse for the playoff. Herbert's returning. He's a great quarterback. NFL first-round potential in all likelihood if he stays healthy.
Yep.
I think Oregon goes 11-1 overall. They beat Auburn. Their only loss will be at Washington, but because Washington is rebuilding/reloading, I think Washington loses a few games. So at the end of the season, I think Oregon, despite that loss, finds themselves right in the mix for the playoff with an 11-1 record going into the conference championship game.
Oregon is my pick as well. They had a really good year last year for a first-year coach. Played some really good, tough football. They returned their whole offensive line along with 10 starters on offense. They're only losing a receiver, but Oregon has never really been a big wide receiver type of team. They've always just kind of plugged guys in who are faster, and they've had success with them. I just think Oregon, it's their time in the Pac-12 this year. I just think they're just ahead of everybody else, really. They return everyone. They do have to go to USC. They go to Washington and Stanford. But Cristobal so far seems like a hell of a coach. I got him winning the division.
One thing I like about Oregon, too, to wrap up the North thoughts with, is they seem to play defense better than when Kelly was there. When Kelly was there, they were going to score on you.
Right.
But there was questions, kind of like Oklahoma now in the Big 12. You know they're going to get their points, but it's going to be who has the ball last. Oregon last year showed me some signs that I think if their defense, and they return a lot of guys on both sides of the ball, Oregon is a dangerous team if that defense continues to shape up. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the South now. Wide open division this year. Could really be anybody's game, but I think it comes down to 2 teams. But for me, my number 6 team is Colorado. Started out 5-0 last year, had the big win at Nebraska early, carried that momentum, and then just fell apart. Lost their last 7 games, fired their coach. Total, complete 180 from where they were at the beginning of the season. I think this year they lose. I think that momentum continues in the wrong direction. I think they go 2-10 overall and 0-9 in the conference. I have them finishing dead last.
Yeah, me too. Don't want to spend too much time talking about a 6th place team, but Laviska Shenault is probably the best wide receiver in the country. I'm actually shocked he's still there. I thought for sure he would have gone to the pros after last year, a new coach coming in. Credit to him, though. Not too many kids are sticking it out, but he's exciting. He could win a couple games by himself, but I got him at 6 and not winning very many games this year.
Number 5 for me, they had a little bit of a better year than I think both of us thought they would last year. I got Arizona State finishing 5th. I think they'd miss out on a bowl. 5-7, 3-6 in the conference. They do return a lot, but Arizona State is one of those teams that when you start to feel like you can trust them, they completely let you down. So I'm not going to fall for that this year. I got them 5th.
I actually, looking at my 5th team, I'm staying in the state of Arizona, just going with the other team there. I'm going with Arizona as number 5. Kevin Sumlin, to me, I think is a better coach than Herman Edwards, but I just think he needs more time. If Khalil Tate stays healthy, though, that's a hell of a quarterback to run his system. I'm still not completely sold on Kevin Sumlin as a coach, though. Yes, he did have success in A&M, but I think I could have had success with Johnny Manziel. It's just, I mean, to an extent. I'm not sold yet. I think he needs more time to get more players there. I got him 5th.
My number 4 team is Arizona. I actually have Arizona winning 7 games with an outside chance at 8. That 5th loss is to Arizona State at the end of the season because it's a rivalry game. Khalil Tate, a couple years ago, burst on the scene, and they haven't really recaptured that magic.
Yeah.
I think this year, Arizona, a lot of games at home, a lot of games late on a Saturday night. Kind of everybody on the East Coast is turning out the lights, going to bed. You could wake up a couple times and find out there were some West Coast upsets after dark when you fell asleep and were dreaming about your fantasy teams on Sunday. Arizona, I think, is a little bit better. I think Kevin Sumlin's a better coach than you give him credit for. He had success at Houston. A&M, it was a total transition, them coming into the SEC, and the SEC West is brutal with LSU and Alabama and Auburn, etc. But the Pac-12 fits his system better with no defense.
Yeah, I was going to say, they don't play.
Yeah, so I got him 4th.
Fair enough. My 4th team is Arizona State. They did have, to me, shocking last year that they were 7-5. I did not see that coming.
Beat a good Michigan State team early in the year.
Exactly. They returned a lot of starters, too, from that team. They do have, I believe they're starting a freshman quarterback. That's always interesting. They do have Eno Benjamin, though, who's probably one of the better running backs in the conference. They do have to replace Harry, correct? And
he's
Harry.
in New England.
Yep.
Yep.
Who was probably one of the best receivers in the country last year. Bailed them out of a lot of situations. I do think, though, this team is primed. Herman Edwards is proving himself that he can coach at this level, so I got him coming in 4th, but not much more than that.
My number 3 team is my Nebraska of the Pac-12, a team that had a horrible first season, but I think has a very, very good-looking second year ahead of them, and that's UCLA with Chip Kelly.
Sure.
Now, not to the same level as Nebraska in terms of wins. I think UCLA has a much more difficult path to that than Nebraska does because they don't have as many games at home and et cetera, but they also play Oklahoma in the non-conference.
Yeah.
I got UCLA finishing 3rd. I think they go 6-6, but I think they get to 5-4 in the league, which, given where they were last year, is a pretty impressive turnaround for year 2. It's progress.
I mean, I have him at number 3 as well. Chip Kelly is one of my favorite coaches in college football. When he had Oregon just rolling, that was some of the most exciting, innovative football I've seen. I've always been a Chip Kelly fan. I'm glad he's back in college football. This is where he belongs. I do think they're going to be much improved, but that schedule is brutal. I think when I was looking at it, and give them another shout out here, Phil Steele's magazine, they have the 8th hardest schedule in the country.
It is.
They play Oklahoma. They go to Washington State, Stanford, Utah, and USC.
Yeah.
That's tough. He does return his quarterback, though, who was his hand-picked guy to run this system. He's capable of running the system. Anything's possible with Chip Kelly if he can get that offense going. I just think he needs more time, especially needs help on the defensive side, needs a little bit more help at skill positions. But I got him coming in 3rd, which where they were last year, behind the other 2 teams, that's a pretty good rebound year for them.
And UCLA, if they can get the talent, there's talent in Southern California.
Absolutely.
There's potential there, looking ahead to 2020 and beyond.
Yeah,
my number 2 team in the South is the team that won it last year. I got Utah. 9-3 season is what I have them at. I think they go 6-3 in the conference. So they don't lose any of their non-conference games. They go 6-3. But I think Utah loses at Southern Cal, which is a Friday night game. That's tough to go on the road. I know it's not a super long trip or anything, but Utah is very tough at home, but they didn't get the benefit of having the big games at home like they did last year, so I think this year they come up just short.
Fair enough. My 2nd place team, I have USC as my 2nd place team. I just don't trust Clay Helton. It's just as simple as that. I know Daniels is very talented. It's USC, for crying out loud. They have endless talent. Could they win the division? Absolutely. I just don't really see it happening. They do have an easier schedule, though, when I was looking at it than I thought. They do have Utah, Oregon, UCLA, and Stanford all at home. Those should be winnable games for them outside of maybe Oregon, but they could give them a good game there. I just got them coming in 2nd because I just don't trust the coach that's there, and it's just as simple as that.
I actually have USC winning. I think they go 8-4, and then 6-3 in the conference. USC opens with Fresno State, which should be a trickier game than you'd probably expect, but I think USC gets
Fresno's always weird.
They won a lot of games last year.
Yeah.
I think USC wins that game, but I think USC, they're one of those teams where they stumble out of the gate and they catch fire at the end of the season. I think that's somewhat what's going to happen this year. I think they'll lose a little earlier on in the season, maybe lose to Stanford in week 2. But I think they get hot at the end, and I think they beat Utah, which gives them the head-to-head advantage, and I think they make it back to the Pac-12 championship game.
How crazy would it be if USC starts 0-2 with Fresno and Stanford?
It's not inconceivable.
That would be crazy. My number 1 team I have winning the South is Utah. I think Utah's going to have a really good year. When I was looking at it, they do have the best returning defense in the Pac-12. They're going to have the best defense in the Pac-12. They're usually one of the top defenses in the country. They do return their quarterback, their leading rusher, all 5 of their leading producers at wide receiver, 3 starters on the offensive line, 7 starters coming back off a top-ranked defense. All of that just smells like success to me. I think this is their year in the conference. Other teams in that division are kind of rebuilding. That would be normal threats. USC, UCLA, everything like that. I just think it's Utah's time.
One quick note about Utah. They have been very successful for a team that came from a group of 5 Mountain West Conference.
Yeah.
They have won 9 games every year but like 2017 since they've been in the Pac-12. That is extremely impressive.
Kyle Whittingham, what he's doing there, he might be the best coach in the Pac-12. Him and Mike Leach are up there for me as getting the best out of a school that you wouldn't expect them to.
So you have Utah and Oregon in your Pac-12. Who do you have winning?
I have Oregon winning that game. I think Utah definitely will be good enough to keep that game very close. I think Oregon's going to have to fight to win that game, but I do have Oregon winning that game and being Pac-12 champs.
I have Oregon and USC. Now, these two will have played earlier in the year in the Coliseum. I think Oregon wins the Coliseum game, and I think Oregon wins the rematch.
Yep.
USC not ready to win a conference title. They're good enough to get there in a jumbled South, but they're not good enough to take down an Oregon team, which I will have going 12-1 and winning the Pac-12, but you'll have to wait until I find out if I have them in the playoff or not. All right, so wrapping up our thoughts on the Pac-12.
The Pac-12, it's one of the more intriguing conferences, I think. I think there's a lot going on there. I do think, though, kind of like where we started this video, I think people look at it as the worst of the Power Fives. I think that's accurate. I don't think this year is really going to change much. I do think they have a couple teams that can be elite. I just don't see much past their top to bottom. They're not very strong. The top's good. Middle's just kind of average to me. They're going to have a good year. They could potentially get some wins in the bowl season, which hasn't really been good from the last couple of years. That's kind of how I see it shaking out for them.
All right. Thank you guys. Again, like our page on Facebook, subscribe to our channel on YouTube. We greatly appreciate all the views, follows, likes, comments, etc., etc. We'll come at you next time with our video of the Big 12 preview. This is Loft Sports signing off.
Thank you.
This is weird now about to fart on camera.